بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده ولا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح من زكاها. Alhamdulillah, we're still blessed to be present in the holy month of Ramadan, and it's a time where people that are fasting, we are trying to improve ourselves as human beings. It's a time when we are giving up certain luxuries, certain permissible things for a greater cause. The cause being, or the objective being, to attain the one thing, and that one thing is taqwa, piety. It's also a time when people are paying zakat, if they are eligible to do so. Now, if you look at fasting and zakat, they are part of the 5 pillars of Islam. Obviously, the other ones being the declaration of faith, the namaz itself, zakat, the hajj when the time is due, and obviously fasting itself. So this in itself should show how important fasting and zakat are. Now, zakat is obviously only eligible for those people who have had the minimum threshold of assets, and they pay the 2.5% after one lunar calendar year. But the reality is that fasting, not starving, but fasting and zakat have a relationship between themselves, as all of the 5 pillars do. Now, for argument's sake, just for today's purpose, I'm going to focus on the 4 to make a point. You see, the 4 other pillars, the fasting, the prayer, the zakat and the hajj, there are conditions that must be met for one to carry these out. For example, the hajj, a person must pay off their debts prior to doing the hajj. They must also seek forgiveness from everyone they have perhaps wronged. The namaz itself, a person must do wudu. They must be able to perform the wudu, and then obviously they can go and pray. When a person fasts, they must be an adult, sane person. Obviously, when I say adults, I don't mean by a number, I mean by they have gone through puberty and are therefore classed as an adult. Zakat, as I mentioned, the minimum threshold or the nisab must be met for a person to pay the 2.5%. However, once these conditions for the different pillars have been met, a person must fulfill other conditions during the actual acts of worship, because they are all acts of worship. You see, the word zakat and the word taskiyah come from the same root word. You can perhaps even hear similar letters in zakat and taskiyah being pronounced. The meaning of the root word is to purify. Zakat purifies the wealth. We know this. Something that's sat in our bank accounts far away, you may never see because we spend it electronically with a card. However, we know the zakat we pay purifies that which we cannot see. What do you think should be of the things we can see in the mirror? The things like the eyes, the tongue, the hands, shouldn't they be purified too? Fasting is a process by which a person can purify themselves. People that are on the spiritual fasting course, they are doing this right now. Perhaps some of you are not aware of this course, and you can see the details on the bottom of the screen. Maybe you are interested in how you can also be fasting spiritually, all of the 7 organs, and purifying the 7 organs. And this is nothing new. We know when a person or people do wudu, yes, of course, you are removing the physical impurities from the face, the hands, the feet, etc. But according to the authentic hadith, we also know that the sins associated with the eyes, when you wash the face, they are removed. The sins associated with the tongue, when we rinse our mouth, they are removed. So you can understand there is a hidden and an apparent blessing in something such as the wudu or any act of worship. There is the inner and the outer purification going on. For example, I here have a glass of water. This is a glass of water. However, if a stranger was to offer you this, the first thing you do is you see with your eyes, well, it's transparent, so it looks like water. You would then perhaps bring it closer. It's odorless, so it smells like water. You would then perhaps take one sip and test it. It's tasteless, so therefore it must be water. Now, on the other hand, somebody else offered you this, and it was perhaps a black or brown with bits floating inside. Would you dare drink this? No, of course not. The point I'm trying to make is You wouldn't even drink something as simple as water if it wasn't pure. Risk of contamination, risk of germs, etc. What about the things that are already inside us? The water is something external we can take at our own choice. What about the things inside us already? Shouldn't they also be purified? See, tazkiyah, tasawwuf, purification, call it what you wish, is nothing new. Fasting has been around for hundreds of years, taught to us by our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Purification has been around since their time as well. You can read this in the Seerah. Read the Seal Nectar, even page 75. I've given you the page reference. Read for yourself. What was the Prophet ﷺ doing with the early companions before the Hijrah, before the Battle of Badr? What were they doing? They were purifying the Sahabi. They would meet secretly because at the time they were under pressure and under threat. The numbers were relatively small. They were purifying the companions. They were teaching them how to master the 7 organs. They were teaching them how to remove love of dunya and have love of the akhirah. Afterwards, when these purified people were purified, they took the pure message out and spread it all over the world. And even until today, we can see the fruits of their blessings and of their works. So please, my dear brothers and sisters, understand that purification is nothing new. Maybe our misunderstanding is here, and we need to understand that fasting is a part of purification. It's compulsory upon individuals who meet the criteria. Now, I said fasting and I said not starving because we know starving is only considering one organ, the stomach. Yes, you don't eat and drink during the daylight hours. Fasting, spiritual fasting, covers all the 7 organs. Ask yourself which one is better. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, all of us, everybody watching, myself, the cameraman, the director, the editor, all of us, we are all going to leave this world. We all want to enter Jannah. We all want to enter the only place that's pure, that's clean, that's sinless. Only the pure enter the pure. Only the purified enter Jannah, as mentioned by the Quranic verse I used to open this bayan. One of the great scholars, Hazrat Imam al-Haldad, they talk about the relationship between the inner and the outer. In their book, the Book of Assistance, they dedicate an entire chapter talking about the inner and the outer. Now, when I say the inner and the outer, think back to what I talked about the wudu, how there's an outer purification going on of the organs and an inner purification of the sins. They mention this and they say that even in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the inner and the outer. If there's any single verse in the Holy Quran that mentions the outer, it only comes after the inner. Allah Azza wa Jalla in the Holy Quran, you can pick any verse, find a verse that mentions the outer aspects of a person and how to purify them. It only comes after the inner, meaning the inner comes first and the inner is actually more important. They go on to say, the great Imam go on to talk about the inner and the outer purification. They say that there are people and who perhaps outwardly look the parts. They may look righteous and pious. They may have the beard. They may have the turban and the jubba and all these other beautiful ornaments and robes of piety. But you and I both know that these things are not necessarily hard to attain. The beard, for example, is one of the easiest ones to follow. It's rather effortless. You just don't shave. You just sit there and it grows. The turban, or the Imam Sharif and the jubba and all these beautiful things, they can be purchased if you have enough funds. But the point they're making that when a person does these things, they should also be working on the inner characteristics, adopting the inner sunan, such as nice, polite speech, not backbiting, not lying, not looking at unlawful things, not listening to music, not going to unlawful places. They heavily emphasize there is a strong link between the inner and the outer, as is mentioned in the Holy Quran. The great Imam also, they go on to say, and they talk about the hypocrites and the liars of society. And we are talking, they wrote this book many hundreds of years ago, but even today we can see this. We see this on the media, and I'm not going to name and shame anybody, but you know who I'm talking about. The people that outwardly, they pretend to be one thing, but when they open their mouth, we hear something else. There's something not quite right. The link is not there between the outer and the inner. As I say in this culture, if you are going to talk the talk, then walk the walk. You can outwardly show one thing to somebody, but when you open your mouth, eventually they'll figure out who you are, what you're about. A classic example is once in the time of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, in the time of our beloved prophet Jesus alayhi salam, there were some Jewish men walking past, and they were mocking them, speaking ill of them unnecessarily. And they were masum, they were innocent. Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, they were innocent. They were sinless. But if you listen to how they responded, this will make sense. You see, the Jews, they were mocking the great prophet Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. And Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, in their wisdom, they replied with the words, "Peace be unto you." This is how they responded to somebody speaking ill of them, to somebody disrespecting them. They said, "Peace be unto you." Afterwards, when they were asked by somebody that, "Why did you respond in such a manner?" They were being disrespectful to you and you returned goodness. Our beloved Prophet Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, they said that a vessel can only pour which it contains. A vessel can only pour which it contains. And they were full of goodness. They had no flaws. They were sinless, perfect, polite, well-mannered. So all they could possibly give was goodness. Now, so hopefully you will now begin to understand the relationship between the inner and the outer. The great Imam al-Haddad, they go on to actually define what or who a Sufi is. Perhaps you have heard the term Sufi. Perhaps you have misheard people talk about them. But the great Imam go on to talk about who the Sufi really are, or they say Sufia as in the plural. They define the Sufi as such a person that if a person was to empty out all of their inner qualities, all of their inner characteristics, all of their inner traits, and to put it on a plate or a tray, so everything's there for them to see, they then take this tray out into a public area such as a marketplace, so everybody else can see what they have inside of them. There will be nothing on the tray that they would be ashamed of. This is their definition of a Sufi. This is what we should aspire to be like, that we want to get rid of all of our jealousy, all of our envy, all of our negative thoughts, all of our negative opinions of people, so that maybe one day, inshallah, we do reach this state. They define a Sufi as anybody who has inside them only goodness. This is their definition of a Sufi. They finish off this chapter by talking about the struggle man makes or has to undertake to achieve such a state. They say that if you cannot make the inward like your outward, then try to make the two level. Meaning, if you claim to be a 5-time namazi, a 5-time worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's fine as long as it's true. If you claim to be such a person, righteous and pious, that's fine as long as you live up to those standards. Our beloved Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they said in a hadith nearest to the effect of, they will make a dua, they will make a supplication to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would say, "Oh Allah, make my inward better than my outward, and make my outward virtuous." I'll repeat this. They said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, make my inward better than my outward, and make my outward virtuous. This was the dua they made. They didn't need to. They were already perfect. But they're teaching myself and yourself, we should be trying to achieve this state. We should be trying to constantly purify our inward as well as our outer. So Imam Haddad did say that if you cannot achieve this, if you cannot live up to this level of standard, then at least make the two level. Like I said before, we say in this country, if you're going to talk the talk, then walk the walk. You look at any historical figure in our history, any great scholar, anyone who ever achieved anything worth achieving, such as the like of Hazrat Abdul Aziz Dabbar rahimahullah, Hazrat Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, Hazrat Abdul Qadir Jilani rahimahullah, they were all purified people. They were all people that had to go through the process of purification. Now perhaps you're thinking, I don't need this process, I can just switch off all my bad deeds like that. I don't know. However, if the likes of such great people, such great personalities, our teachers' teachers, If they had to undergo the process of purification, what does that say about myself and yourself? Even great military figures such as Saladin Ayyubi, they had to undergo some form of purification. They were not successful without it. Like I said before, the early Sahabi, they were purified people carrying a pure message. This is why they are successful. This is why today we still remember their names. This is why today we still respect them. This is why today we still pray for them. This is why today we still earn to be with them in the Akhirah, inshallah. So yourself and myself, we can all try our best to purify ourselves. And this is an excellent opportunity. This year, in particular, Ramadan in 2020, during this lockdown, things are certainly easier in some ways. We know the shaitan is on lockdown. One less enemy to consider or be concerned about. However, with a lockdown, we have the benefits of additional free time. Time to reflect. Time to worship. Time to really think about what have we been doing wrong. Think about each of the 7 organs individually. Ask ourselves, are we using our tongue in the prophetic manner? Are we using our eyes in the prophetic manner? And etc. with all the other organs. Because the prophetic manner is the highest of standards. Is the highest of targets we should all be aiming for. You don't even need to be a Muslim to agree that pornography is bad. You don't need to be a Muslim to understand that slander is bad. You don't need to be a Muslim to understand backbiting is bad. But we have been given the best of examples to follow. We don't need any other example. Alhamdulillah, throughout the generations, the Mashayikh have carried the process of purification. They have given us a practical method of rectifying each of the 7 organs and eventually rectifying the heart and the mind as well. Last year I was actually on a course on how to become a qualified coach, and it's quite an interesting conversation I had with the organizer of this seminar. Dr. Simmons and I, we were talking about the reality of a person and the ideals. Every individual, we were talking that every individual has a reality, whether it's our financial reality, our current state financially, our physical reality, how we are physically, how's our health. And we were going on to, we mentioned a bit about the spiritual reality. Every individual has a reality, our current circumstance at this moment in time, where we are right here, right now. These are called realities. We have ideals. Ideally, we wish to be such a person. Ideally, we want to be in such a place, whether it's be financially, spiritually, physically, etc. And that's good, because we were using very simple examples of career, and it was a career-related course I was put on, and it was very useful. But the point I'm trying to make is, we had the greatest of ideals, as I mentioned before, the greatest of exemplars. The final prophet, the greatest of all the prophets and all the messengers, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is our ideal. So the question is, how do you go from your reality to his ideal? Ideally, he wants us to be in such a way. The way we treat people, the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat Ramadan and fasting. Purification is the link. Tazkiyah is the how. How do you stop backbiting? How do you give up pornography? How do you give up music? How do you commit certain other sins? You see, in the world of social media, we get so many messages, nice messages, which are perfectly nice and valid. Don't backbite. Don't do this, don't do that. Do this, do that. True, these are ideals. Purification is the how. Not many people can teach you this, unfortunately. Maybe perhaps they are not aware of how. Maybe they can go, as they say in this culture, cold turkey. They can just switch off sins. But for myself and perhaps yourself, the majority of us, we can't do this. We need a structured procedure. How to stop committing sins of the eyes and the ears and the hands and the feet, etc. So, as I said before, all of the great personalities have had to, at some moment in time, undergo the process of purification. The Prophet ﷺ, they mentioned again in an hadith to the nearest effect that there is a lump of flesh in the body that if it is sound, the whole body is sound. If it is vile, the whole body is vile. This lump of flesh was the heart. I'll repeat this hadith again in English. Our Messenger ﷺ, they said that there is a lump of flesh in the body, that if this lump of flesh is sound, the whole body is sound. If this lump of flesh is vile or corrupt, then the whole body is corrupt. And this lump of flesh is the heart. So we should ultimately be aiming to purify our heart. How do you purify the heart? You start off by purifying the 7 organs. Then you can work on the heart and the mind eventually. So this is how necessary purification is. This is the necessity of purity. The question is, are you willing to undertake this task? The rhetorical question I'm going to leave you with is, you can either choose to be purified now, in this life, in Ramadan, or if you are watching this video after Ramadan, you can still choose to be purified in this life, or you choose to be purified in the Akhirah, in the next life. And I'm going to paint a picture, so to speak, to help you understand further. If you have ever seen an ironmonger who perhaps makes anything of iron or steel or these things, let's say, for example, a sword. If you look at how they actually do this, they get the necessary components, the ingredients, they put them together, they beat it with a hammer to get the necessary shape. But then what they do is very interesting. They actually place the product inside a kiln, inside the fire. Why inside the fire? What does the fire do? The fire removes the impurities from this piece of sword or the metal, whatever it is they are making. It removes the impurities. This is the effect fire has on it. And they know how long it will stay in the kiln. They know how much of the fire it has to be exposed to before it is purified. Only then do they extract the sword or the metal, and then it can be used for what its purpose is. Nobody wants a sword that's brittle. Nobody wants a sword that will break upon impact. The only swords that break upon impact are the ones that contain more and more impurities. The less impurities, the stronger the sword. If something such as simple as a sword has a purpose, must be purified, what's to say about our very own lives that have a purpose? Shouldn't they be purified? Now, the reason why I use the example of this sword in the fire is, one way or another, if you wish to enter heaven, only the pure enter heaven. You can either do it now, or in the hellfire, a person will be purified. If you wish to be amongst the righteous and the pious companions, choose to be purified now, or in the hellfire, your choice. If you wish to be in the presence of the messengers and our beloved messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, choose to be purified now, or in the fire. It's a no-brainer, really. But it's a question that must be asked. If not now, as soon as possible, it must be addressed. Purification is the how to give up your bad sins and adopt good qualities. Purification is the key. This is the necessity of purity. As always, if I have mentioned anything of benefit to you, then all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only the mistakes are mine. Subhanaka wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.